YouTube, Salivate Metal here, and I found another very interesting infographic. And then again, like most of the others that you find out there, these are a little bit outdated. Actually, this one's a lot outdated. Uh, but keep in mind the time, the things, and the investment it takes to put these things together. But it seems like I've not really seen many new infographics. Maybe that's something that's kind of gone out of style these days. But in my mind, it seems like they are pretty relevant and to really tell a story and in such a way in graphical form, which I think is quite interesting. This one talks about the ups and downs of elections, investments in the economy, and I think it's really fascinating. This thing is from 2012, and it talks about how it's impossible to calculate just how much impact a particular president has on the price of gold, the stock market, or even national debt. However, by aligning these changes with parties and presidents, you can get a better idea. And I think that's really generally true. And yes, this is going to be a very simplified view, but I think it just kind of need to see this in terms of how the changes of these different factors we're going to look at throughout history and how they are aligned with presidential administrations. And so the first thing to start out with right out of the bat with gold and silver, and we see here with Carter that it really exploded. And this is the way that this is laid out. It has the price at the end of the term in dollars and the percentage of change at the end of the administration. So we have silver and gold. Silver by the end of Carter's administration was at $16.39 an ounce. That's about where it is today. So quite interesting. So it came down after the big issue, or the big Hunt brothers situation, but it hadn't come down at a whole lot or substantially enough. Now, but it was still, so by the end of Carter's administration was up 276%. Gold was at 562, up 322%. Very interesting indeed. And then Reagan came into office. We saw the continued decline in his first term. That gold had closed at was around $308, and it had come down somewhat, 45%, and silver was continuing to decline to a normalized $6.26, down 61%. By the end of Reagan's term, we saw gold rise a little bit. Some of that may have had to do with the savings and loans crisis and some other things going on. But by the end of Reagan's term, 2 terms, revenues to the Treasury had doubled, and essentially we're in a pretty good economic situation. And the silver reflected that with a lower price, $5.99, but relatively stable there. But gold did raise almost $100 from his first term. During H.W. Bush, we saw gold go down a bit to $329, declining about 18% for his one and only term, and silver went down to $3.69. And I remember that time when silver, I wasn't buying a whole lot at the time, but I did pick up some for about that price, maybe a little bit more than that. I remember buying a silver bar for $4 around that time. And it was about, so that's less than almost 40% decrease there. And then Clinton, we saw pretty much a stable presidency as far as the economics factors we saw the dot-com boom and the bubble, and of course that popped towards the end of the Clinton administration. But essentially we did see gold raise a little bit, up 7% by the end of his first term. And by the end of his second term, we saw gold take a pretty steep drop to $264.90. In fact, I remember towards the end of his administration that gold got down to $252. That number sticks in my mind because I contemplated buying some, and I decided against it because wow, this is really low. But I remember at the time making the foolish mistake of thinking that, well, maybe gold's going out of favor and then people just aren't into it anymore because of the dot-com bubble and people are investing in these stocks and everything. And it's like, well, that's where the money is being made, even though I wasn't much of an investor, and I'm not much of an investor. I don't have any uh, really investments other than just retirement. So, but I made the mistake of not buying a whole lot of gold or more when I could have bought some more then when it was low. And silver has stayed pretty stable there. During George W. Bush's administration, we see that gold risen a little bit to, by the end of his first term, to $422.90. And by that time, I'm starting to buy some more gold and purchasing it. And same thing with silver. I was buying a little bit more silver too, and it had gone up a little bit as well. And and of course, we saw it raise again by the end of Bush's term. We saw gold take a pretty steep increase, and a lot of that I think was due to the Great Recession there. And silver was taking a hike too. And then we see Obama's first term. We saw where both gold and silver really took a steep climb there by the end of 2012 there. Very interesting indeed. Of course, we don't have data for the last 4 years of Obama's administration, but we saw these prices drop pretty dramatically in the interim. But they never got to where the Bush numbers were there. And of course, during the time in Bush, when it was his office, it did go up to over $1,000, as you saw in a previous video that I had posted. So it just ended a little bit lower, but we never saw gold go under $1,000 by the end of Obama's second term. And in fact, we never saw it go below 1,100. I don't think we saw it go. We may have seen $1,000 and some odd dollars, but it definitely didn't go below $1,000. So that's gold and silver. So quite interesting to see. And what kind of correlation is related to some of their policies? There's some marginal effect there, I think, but it's just definitely interesting. And then we see inflation, and I think these other factors here play a larger role. And some of this stuff is natural, not really caused by politicians. Others of it are. I think they can certainly aggravate it or exacerbate it, and or quell it. So we shall see inflation. If you adjust gold prices for inflation, prices in 1980 would have exceeded today's. Inflation was at an all-time high during the Carter presidency, and you see there it was at 13.58, and there's Ford, his numbers too, where it was kind of going up during the middle. It was probably this here arrow here was probably related to the fuel shortage, what was going on there before the petrodollar really took effect. Let's see here. So Reagan, we saw the inflation go down drastically based off the supply side economic policies that he put into place. Bush kind of went up a little bit. I think that's part and parcel to his no new taxes pledge. But by and large, they were riding on the Reagan economy, because by the end of Reagan's second term, yes, there was some things going on with the savings and loans and other odds and ends. There's some natural cycles there, but essentially, by and large, these policies, the tax cuts, and took effect in '83, really helped, and less regulation on business and the like. And I think that carried over. And during Clinton's administration, inflation stayed low because you had the dot-com bubble, but also the internet really took off and became an unregulated powerhouse. And to this day, it's relatively unregulated and booming. Of course, there's booms and busts in any kind of economic cycles, but generally, we're much better today with the internet being unregulated, even through its ups and downs, especially with these bubbles that popped with the dot-com boom. And Bush kind of kept things, as far as inflation, it didn't really take off a whole lot. In fact, it almost mirrors Clinton's, although it was less during the first part of Bush's portion there. But then under Obama, we saw there's a negative 0.34%. I guess it went down the second year. I'm not sure exactly how what that means. I guess it means inflation had gone down, and that when inflation goes, that's a deflationary period. And Obama's policies and the like, we see the slowest economic recovery in history. And with growth, with the GDP growth at under 3% throughout his whole term. And but we really didn't see much inflation towards the economic crisis that occurred with the Great Recession towards the end of Bush's era. So, and of course, obviously, this is going to have some role in gold and silver prices. And but very interesting indeed. And so we talk about Obama's presidency. The country actually experienced deflation for the first time since 1955. And I think that's where, when the Fed saw that deflationary period, that's probably when they started the quantitative easing into hyperdrive, because they didn't want that, because deflation, too much deflation can be bad as well, too. All right, then the Dow Jones. We see it here. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but look at how crazy it got. Some of this is the dot-com bubble and the like, but then it just kept being pumped up, propped up. We had the recession, and it dropped down. But even at the lowest here, still way above down here. Very amazing. And then look here, 13,171. By the time Trump got into office, it got to 21,000. Crazy. Let's see. And the federal debt, this is an interesting one. This is the going to be the last portion here. This is quite interesting. The net federal debt, how it's risen since Ford here. It's gone up drastically under every president. And at the end of Obama's second term, we've seen it go way up there. And obviously, at the end of Obama's second term, it went up even more drastically. And to me, that's something it's not going to bite us anytime soon, but I think it will bite us hard. I think that we're being very hubris and just acquiring so much debt, and that's going to be paid by our great-great-grandchildren. Let's see. All right. So very interesting indeed. Under Bush, it did go down a little bit, but then it really went up like crazy. The thing is about Bush is he never vetoed a single spending measure. And even though it did subside a little bit here, he ended up, especially with the bailouts, bringing our nation more in debt under George W. Bush than all 42 presidents behind him. And then when Obama left office, he doubled that. So he essentially accumulated more debt in his 2 terms as president than all 43 presidents behind him. It's quite sad where that states, but so what will that mean for gold and silver? It's anybody's guess at this point, and it's very hard to predict, but it's quite fascinating to see this infographic and how it's all played out. So post your thoughts below. Just thought it was kind of a neat thing to kind of peruse through. I'd like to extend a multitude of gratitude to you all for watching, and encourage you to please rate, comment, and subscribe.